Now I'd like officially to say welcome to this webinar digging deeper into the Bosnian pyramids. We are so happy that so many of you would like to join us now live, and also welcome to the ones who are watching later on in the video that we will be posting out later. And for this webinar, you see the three of us here who are hosting it. It's Rich Hoyle, who is the field geologist of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun Foundation. So he really has a finger on the pulse of what's going on in Bosnia right now, and he has been working there for many years now and knows, like, he's one of the people who knows most about these pyramids. So it's really awesome that we can do this together. And then we also have Rie, who has written a book about the pyramids in Danish. And myself, and my name is Julie Mariel, and I'm an anthropologist and working with within the field of spirituality. And Rie and I are having hosting travels to Bosnia with our co-joint project Portal Journeys. And to just give you a brief introduction to how the three of us got involved with this whole pyramid project, we'll make a short round of introducing ourselves and shortly just telling you how we ended up in Visico. So Richard, would you like to start?
Sure, yeah. So thanks for the introduction, Julie, and welcome to everyone. Thanks for joining us. So I was a student at Leeds University studying hydrocarbon geology. And, my father was also in the industry, so I felt like I needed to follow in his footsteps. Unfortunately, he wasn't really catching my, full attention. There was something lacking. I didn't really like the destruction of the environment that the industry is responsible of. And I was reading some alternative theories to pyramids while I was studying sedimentology. Obviously, the pyramids in Giza are built out of limestone. And I was reading, for example, Graham Hancock's books, Thoth, Architect for the Universe by Ralph Ellis. That was one that initially caught my attention. And I took myself on a trip, a research trip to the Giza Plateau, just to see how these alternative theories, if they matched up to reality, because if they did, it would change a lot of things from my perception of history. And on my return back from that trip, I was just Googling some things regarding what I was looking for. And I saw a picture of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun randomly pop up on Google Images. And immediately looking at this picture, I was like, well, that's a pyramid. What's all the fuss about? And I found the email address to Dr. Sam, who was this gentleman beginning this research. And I wrote him a really, really long email, lots of questions. I think I took about 2 hours formulating this email, trying to make myself sound smarter than I actually am. And he actually replied within about 30 minutes, which was really good of him, because I'm sure he gets a lot of emails from everyone asking similar questions. But his email was simply, probably easier if you come here. And I couldn't really argue with that. So in the summer, between years of study at university, I took myself to Visico, central Bosnia. And that was the first volunteer shift ever in 2010. And basically, that's where it started for me.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And yeah, maybe I should tell my story now, because Rie's story and mine are intertwined, as you can probably tell, because Rie and I are sisters. And for me, getting involved with the pyramids started with a friend of mine in high school who is originally from Bosnia, who came to live in Denmark in the beginning of the 90s because of the war. And she asked Rie and I if we wanted to come with her to Sarajevo for a summer holiday to spend some time there in her family's apartment and look around. And we were eager to do that, not knowing that there were something this exciting in Bosnia. But then she showed us, maybe to get us a little more hooked on the idea of going, she showed us some footage of the tunnels and the the pyramids, and we were super excited, and we're just thrilled to be able to go there. So we went there on holiday and went out for just a single day to see the pyramids. And we were so lucky that on that exact tour in the tunnels, we were able to join Dr. Sam's tour. And so he showed us around. And afterwards, Rie purchased a book of his, and we got to talk with him a little bit. And he found out that we were anthropologists. And he got us in touch with Ricardo, the archaeologist at that time. And he almost put us to work straight there on the spot because he assumed that we might be volunteers, which is possible there. But that got us hooked on the idea that we could become volunteers. So we went back in 2013, the year after, and joined as volunteers there for 2 weeks. And there we met Richard and became good friends with him. And the following year, I went back again as a volunteer for yet another shift. And Ria, your story is a little different from here on.
Yeah, I think this is where I should butt in because, after having visited first as a tourist and then the next year as a volunteer, I was so fortunate that I got offered a position as research assistant in 2014. It was the year when Tim Moon was in charge of the excavations. So I was helping out there with the research and also with supervising excavations and coordinating the volunteers. And that was a really, really exciting experience. And after that, I came back and I did a training as shaman, modern day shaman, like Julie did. We're both working with shamanism and we're anthropologists. And as the latest thing, I wrote a book about the pyramids. So I got to really look into every detail. I knew a lot about it before, but to write this, I had to really study into everything that's been written. So that's also been a very interesting journey down the rabbit hole. And Julie and I are guiding tours to the pyramids now. So we had our first tour in the summer 2019, and we were supposed to go there twice this year, but as you know, that couldn't happen. So we hope we'll be back this year.
Yeah, thank you, Rie. And now let's get to talk about these pyramids. We assume that some of the people watching tonight already know something about the pyramids, but there might also be some who are new to this topic. So to start off, it would be nice to just, if maybe Richard, you could give just a tiny tour of what are the Bosnian pyramids, and then it would be lovely to hear from both you, Richard, first, and then Ria afterwards. What are your very best arguments that these are actually man-made pyramids?
Okay, so brief introduction. 2005 was when the Bosnian Pyramids, the phenomena was first announced across the world's media by a gentleman, as we mentioned, Dr. Sam Osmanagich. He's the discoverer of the Bosnian Pyramids. And from that time, 2005, beginning in 2006, excavations and scientific research has been ongoing. So we're now at, 15th, 16th year of those investigations. Now, the locations principally that have been under investigation is the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, formerly known as Visočica Hill. We also have Bosnian Pyramid of the Moon, and Tumulus, I should say, which is similar to Silbury Hill in Wiltshire, UK, almost exactly the same height, dimensions. It has one of the largest megalithic blocks discovered in Europe. And also, most importantly, and where most of the activity is taking place right up till today, are the Ravner Tunnels. Now, this is an underground network of tunnels, which at present we are about 2.5 kilometers away from the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun. And when these tunnels were first found, they'd actually been backfilled. So in the time since their first discovery, the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun Foundation has been focused on removing the loose rubble material, which is blocking access into this tunnel network. Now, I might add just the dimensions of the pyramid. So principally in the center of the Bosnian Pyramid Valley, we have three major pyramids: the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, Bosnian Pyramid of the Moon, and the Bosnian Pyramid of the Dragon. And I guess one of the reasons why the Bosnian pyramids are so contentious is because of the sheer scale of the sites. The Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is approximately 300 meters tall. We haven't pinned down the exact foundations of the structure yet. A Bosnian Pyramid of the Moon, which is the second tallest, is 190 meters tall. So that one's 50 meters taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Bosnian Pyramid of the Dragon is a little bit smaller. That's only 70 meters tall, but it's still absolutely huge compared to most pyramids known around the world. Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, the sheer scale of it, it's been estimated by structural engineers in terms of mass to be 33 times more massive than the Great Pyramid of Giza. So this is very hard for people to get their heads around, because obviously until 2005, no one at all had heard of pyramids in Bosnia before.
Yeah, and also these pyramids are covered in vegetation, so therefore it has been said that these pyramids are just mountains, and that's the reason they have been laying there undiscovered for so long, because they blend into the landscape. So Richard, how can you say that it's not just mountains?
So you're asking for some of the proofs. Okay, so first of all, being covered in vegetation, there are still many, many, many pyramids. I mean, we don't actually know how many pyramids that are still buried in the Amazonian rainforest, for example. The pyramids outside of Mexico City, when they were discovered in the 19th century, they were covered in soil and trees. So to find pyramids in Bosnia to be covered, that's to be expected if we look at the vast majority of pyramids that have yet to be excavated around the world. So one of the key sort of points to these being not normal hills, for example, is their orientation. So first of all, the Bosnian Pyramid of Sun, Moon, and Dragon all have four sides, and they're oriented towards the cardinal points: north, south, east, and west, very accurately. So that's one tell. You can look at the pyramids in Giza, for example, on the Giza Plateau, the Great Pyramid, that's oriented north, south, east, west. Some of the pyramids around the world aren't. I'll give you that. For example, some might be offset at significant numbers like 12 degrees, 30 degrees, 60 degrees. But here we see, just like in Egypt, north, south, east, west. Now, some people will argue, for example, that, well, there are pyramidal shaped mountains all around the world. Take, for example, the Matterhorn in the Alps. That's got pyramidal faces, and that is also closely oriented north, south, east, west. You also have the sacred mountain Kailash in the Himalayas, triangular faces, north, south, east, west. In the UK, we have a pyramidal shaped mountain called Great Gable in the Lake District. That's got triangular faces, and it's approximately oriented north, south, east, west. So why is it any different? If these are hills, why aren't we calling the Bosnian pyramids just hills? Well, all of those examples that I've just previously listed are isolated, standalone triangular mountains. There's just one with that form. When we look at the Bosnian Pyramid Valley, for example, we have the Bosnian Pyramid of Sun, Moon, and Dragon. Not only all three of them oriented north, south, east, west, approximately 2.2 kilometers peak to peak from each other, but they form a near perfect equilateral triangle with internal angles of 60 degrees. And this figure of the equilateral triangle isn't just occurring here in the Bosnian Pyramid Valley. We actually see it in several other pyramid complexes around the world. The Giza Plateau, for example, two of the pyramids form an apex of an equilateral triangle, and the surveying point that was used for the construction of the pyramid site forms the equilateral triangle at Giza. We also have in South America, for example, there is another pyramid site, Tiwanaku, that also forms a near perfect equilateral triangle. And of course, the figure of an equilateral triangle is an ancient sacred symbol in itself. So there is a very significant reason why we see the three pyramids in Bosnia forming that equilateral triangle between their peaks.
Thank you. And Rie, maybe you'd like to add some of your favorite arguments that it's actually man-made structures.
Yes. Well, first of all, we can look at the concrete that the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is made out of. It's concrete blocks that are neatly layered on top of each other. They're rectangular with right-angled corners. So when you look at that, to me, that's a smoking gun. And the concrete, at first, if you're not trained, it can look quite natural because it's been made in a way that is similar to how nature works, but it's distinct from natural concrete in the sense that it's these rectangular blocks and that they are forming this perfect pyramid. But the concrete has been tested and found to be artificial.
Yeah, and let me just interject for a second there, Ree, sorry. But yeah, this is one issue that we do face. So if we do have some geologists, we don't have that many, to be perfectly honest. But when we do get some geologists come to actually conduct some field investigations in the Bosnian Pyramid Valley, they look at the material on the north face of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun that's been exposed. And, you know, they say, well, it just looks like natural stone. So obviously it's natural stone, therefore it's all natural and nothing to see here. Again, without taking into account the other aspects, for example, the orientation, the alignments, so on and so forth, plus the myriad of other proofs that we have, which we can go into in a little while. But let's just talk about geopolymer technology, which is fairly recent in modern times. And this is a means through using natural sedimentary materials and chemical reactants, we can actually produce a man-made stone that will appear like a natural stone, and where nature would take thousands or maybe millions of years to produce a sandstone from, say, loose sand that you would find on a beach. Through chemical reactions, we can create that same material in a matter of hours, maybe 2 days at the most, depending on if you're using exothermic or endothermic reactions. But it can cure within a couple of hours. And actually, if you expose those geopolymers to the natural elements, cold, wind, rain, you will actually find that the surface weathers to look almost exactly the same as a natural stone would. So if you consider the age of the pyramids, which again we will go into in a little while, it's no wonder then that a geologist would look at this material and then just say, well, it just looks like natural stone. But if we're talking about a geopolymer technology, which by the way isn't unheard of, Joseph Davidovits is saying the same thing about the Giza blocks on the Great Pyramid of Giza being a geopolymerized material, then it's not really difficult to understand why a geologist would say it just looks like a natural stone, because geopolymers are supposed to look like natural stone.
Good point.
Yes, thank you. And it's great that we can supplement each other like this. So don't be shy to interrupt me. It's so good to have your geological perspective on it. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about this archaeological project, that it's open to also look at it from other angles, to have, for example, you as a geologist working with it. That adds a lot, because if you look at an archaeological site only through archaeological perspective, it will give you fewer answers than if you add people such as geologists to have that perspective.
Well, let me just interrupt you again. Actually, something that happened yesterday on a web portal in Bosnia, an article had just been published, and I think it was written by, or at least it had comments by a historian, professor, Bosnian, I do believe, and recently he's just completely criticised the project in this article that came out yesterday as a historian. And you know, as a historian, your sources of information have to come from, you know, written books, texts, records. So from a historian's point of view, if they don't have historical texts or records, then in their mind, I suppose it doesn't exist. So when we're talking about prehistoric material structures, there is going to be no historic record if they've not been previously recognised. And this professor was quite insulting towards the efforts that the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun Foundation have been conducting, spreading rumours and such, which we can go into in a little bit. But right now he's bringing up the old argument that the foundation is damaging the legitimate archaeology. And he's talking about the medieval fort on top of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun. And his arguments that all we're doing is destroying things is complete nonsense, because we've never even touched the top near that fort. And actually, in the 10 years that I've been working here, I've seen how archaeologists are reconstructing this medieval fort. And they've made a pig's ear of it, really. They've completely destroyed the remaining foundations of that fort themselves. So yeah, we're dealing with a lot of disinformation about what's happening, to take attention away from the evidence that actually the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun Foundation has accrued since 2005. Again, this historian, he's not mentioned anything about the LiDAR survey that was conducted in 2012. He's not mentioned anything about the seismic surveys that were conducted by Russian Institutes of Science. I think that I will bring that up in a second, but we had two geophysicists from Russia, from the Academy of Sciences, conduct seismic surveys of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun. Did the historian mention that their conclusions suggested that the internal structure matched that of the Great Pyramid of Giza? No, he didn't, because he's an historian, he's not a geophysicist, and he's not willing to look outside of his sort of narrow section of expertise. And like you say, Ray, this is a multi-dimensional project where we have multidisciplinary, I should say, where we have all kinds of people coming together, bringing their expertise. So we have engineers, physicists, biologists, doctors, medical doctors. We have geographers, geologists, etc., coming here, adding their little piece to the puzzle.
Yes. And I think we will go into the chronology after this, because that would help understand why also it is so hard to believe for people who are new to this idea of the Bosnian pyramids. But before we move on, I would like to just say, if you who are watching have some questions popping up along as we go, if you don't understand what's being said and you have some questions into these things, please write them in the chat in the right hand side. And in the end of the webinar, we will spend some time answering all questions, all kinds of questions. So if you have questions for clarification, come with them as we go along, and otherwise you can ask the rest of the questions in the end. And Rie, did you get to finish on your proofs, or were you about to mention a last thing?
Well, one more smoking gun, I think, is the drywalls inside the tunnels. They're really important, because some have claimed that the tunnels are natural tunnels, or that the foundation is digging them themselves, or that it's old mining tunnels. But all of these theories can be rejected, because we keep on, as we excavate, or as they excavate the tunnels, they keep on finding new drywalls. So that means that the tunnels have been there. It's not the foundation digging them themselves, because there are drywalls coming all the time. And also, just to wipe off the mining theory, there's nothing to mine for, and there are no traces of mining, no chemicals, no minerals left that should have been there. So the drywalls are really important as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the arguments that we hear is that it's an old mine. And this comes from the fact that in a nearby town, there was in fact a gold mine. And there's actually a local history book that writes about there being some sort of suggestion of a mine in the Ravner Tunnels area. But this history book was written in the 1980s, and it literally is 2 lines saying, and there's a mine in this area. No evidence, no references as to how he's come to this, the author's come to this conclusion. And when we look at Ravner Tunnels and we say, okay, let's see, how is it a mine? Well, from a geological perspective, to first of all classify anything as a mine, you need to have minerals of economic importance. Okay, so whatever that be, coal, gold, silver, aluminium, whatever you're mining, it needs to have some monetary value to make it worthwhile to put that effort in to mine it. Now, that's the first thing. Now, let's play devil's advocate for a second. And let's just say that the Ravner Tunnels is full of gold, okay, because there's a gold mine in the next town along. So let's say Ravner Tunnels is a gold mine. The way that these people would be mining that gold, if we look at how the tunnels have been created through that conglomerate deposit, it's the most terrible mining exercise anyone's ever seen. It's a near surface deposit. So if you were going to mine it, and of course, again, we're talking about economic importance. So we've got to look at the amount of energy that you're putting into extracting that mineral. You're going to want to make it as efficient as possible to make as much money as possible. Digging these, really intricate tunnels in all kinds of directions, sometimes random directions, sometimes intersecting each other. That's the most inefficient method of mining this kind of deposit. It would be almost certainly an open cast mine. Because it's near surface, you would just dig from the side and just systematically move forward through the deposit. You wouldn't need to be digging these random tunnels. If you were following, for example, a mineral vein, then maybe you would be digging these tunnels through the deposit. However, the kind of rock that we're looking at has no mineral veins because it's just a loosely consolidated near surface conglomerate that's fairly young, geologically speaking. So all these people that are saying, oh, it's just a mine, I guarantee you not a single one of these people has any knowledge of geology or mining. I'll just put it there.
Yeah. So, but it's been very contested still about these pyramids, whether it can actually be true, because it's also so unbelievable how old they actually are. And that goes against many theories about when civilization was evolved enough to create structures like this. So would one of you like to take us through the chronology of the building of these pyramids and the tunnels?
So we have various dates to work with. We haven't actually pinpointed the exact age of the construction of the pyramids, but we do have some limits, let's say, for example. And just to add, when I was at school, the oldest civilization was 6,000 years old, Sumeria. At a push now, they're saying maybe 8,000 years old. But since the water damage on the Sphinx, for example, on the Giza Plateau, or other discoveries such as Göbekli Tepe in the south of Turkey, we're seeing that the age of advanced, let's say, stone megalithic cultures is much older than 6,000 years, which, that was being professed 20 years ago. So every year we're pushing back that age. So the ages that we're actually working with now in Bosnia, if we look at the trend at how these ages are getting older and older, what we're working with won't actually seem so out of context eventually. It's getting there right now, but it, 20 years ago, 6,000 years, if we're going to say 10,000 plus, obviously that would be scoffed at. But now it's not looking so unreasonable when we say maybe 20,000 years old, because one of the latest finds that we had was inside a new section of the Ravner Tunnels, the Ravner 3 tunnels, which was discovered in 2018. We had some speleothems, so some stalagmites and stalactites. and we used uranium-thorium radiometric dating, and we were able to determine a minimum age of 19,000 years, and that was deposited above one of the drywalls stratigraphically. So that means that the drywall had to have been in place first before that stalagmite could have started forming 19,000 years ago. So that's a minimum age for the formation, well, not the formation of the tunnels, but the tunnel drywalls being put into place, 19,000 years old. And this would be one of the more sort of reliable methods of dating that we've used. The problem with using carbon-14 dating, which we have relied upon, is that it's open to being disrupted by groundwater, bringing in fresh carbon-14 into the sample. So, and obviously the older things get, the less reliable carbon-14 is. So some of those carbon-14 dates that we have, they're interesting, but for me, the uranium-thorium dating that we completed earlier this year is something definitely to pay attention to. And we do have plans as well to use thermo-luminescence dating. And now this, when we do this, it will be absolutely fantastic proof that we have for the age of these pyramids. And how this works is that we're actually able to determine when a piece of material, an object, the surface of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, for example, when it last saw sunlight. So when was it buried? Now, the limit on this age, on this method, is about 5 million years old. We can use it for young geological material. Now, if we take the natural explanation, it's just a hill, the age of the Vysočica, if it's just a hill, would be anywhere between 24 and 5 million years old. So if we do thermoluminescence on the surface of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, and it's older than the limit of that test, we don't really need to know how old the material is. If it exceeds the limit of the testing method, thermoluminescence, then we can say it's a natural hill. However, anything younger than that, then we've got to look at it with some interest, because if it's 30,000 years, 50,000 years, 100,000 years, even a million years, it's still interesting scientifically, because, as I say, the geology in the region is somewhere between 24 and 5 million years old. So if we find a rock deposit that's significantly younger than that, then we have to actually re-examine the whole geological history of this region.
Yeah, so that will be really exciting to see how that goes. But so with the results that you have for now, you can say that at least the tunnels with the drywalls were built no later than 18,000 years ago. Is that correct?
I think it's 19,000 years plus or minus 2,000 years. So we're looking at the end of the glacial maximum. So this was when the ice sheets were actually retreating. And so we'd have slowly but surely there'd be obviously climatic changes. There'd also be a lot more water. The oceans would be filling back up with that ice melting. So we would be seeing cultures migrating from areas where previously they didn't have access to because of the ice sheets. But as they're retreating, there's going to be a lot of migration across the European continent. So maybe that has something to do with the tunnels being produced, although that's not my area of expertise. But it is interesting to see that the age that we got does coincide with the end of the glacial maximum.
Yeah. Good. And there is a question here that I haven't heard before. That is, do you know more about what size the people had at the time they were building the pyramids? I haven't looked into that. Do any of you know anything about that?
The size of the people. I think this comes from the fact that those tunnels are, a lot of the tunnels, not all of them, because the tunnels do change in shape and size, but some of those tunnels are very small. And you have to actually get down on your knees to actually travel through them. I think we have to understand that perhaps these tunnels weren't actually made as a communication route necessarily. They may have been. Some of them, I'll say, some of the tunnels are over 3 meters in height, but some of them are less than a meter. It might not all of those tunnels might not have the same function. Some of them might not be made for people to be walking up and down. So I wouldn't use the shape and size of the tunnels to make any sort of conclusions as to the height of the people that built those tunnels. Because just as we can crawl on our hands and knees, so could people back in those days as well. However, maybe they were shorter than they are today. Who knows?
Yeah. And Rie, I would like you to tell a little bit, if you would like to do so, about this subject of why the pyramids are being so questioned, and so why do so many people doubt it? We've been touching upon that already, and also why haven't people heard about these pyramids when it seems to be the most massive pyramid in the world? You've written something about that in your book, so maybe you could say something about that.
Yes, surely. Well, what I've come to realize with my studies of the Bosnian pyramids is that in society, there is this tendency that people who are up in high power, highly estimated, they're the ones we listen to, and we ask fewer questions to their arguments than we do to people of lower status. And this has a very conservative impact on how we look at everything and how slowly things changed also within science. So with the Bosnian pyramids, the European Association of Archaeologists have made a statement that was published after a short visit to the Bosnian pyramids. According to Philip Coppens, the head of the of the European Association of Archaeologists, just took a taxi tour around to see the sites, and that was all that was done. So it was a very brief survey. Just look at it and not go into more detail or further scientific investigation. But the European Association of Archaeologists made a statement stating that it's not pyramids, it's a cruel hoax on humanity, and it has no place within the field of genuine science. And that statement has really caught on, and it's been shared, and people listen to that regardless of the fact that it's not backed by science. Yeah. And I've tried the same thing, actually, personally. I was on the radio here in Denmark being interviewed, and I was given half an hour interview where I went into all the details with the concrete and the tunnels and blah, blah, blah. And then afterwards, they didn't tell me this, but after I left, they also asked a professor in archaeology, so, okay, is it true? We've just heard this half an hour from this girl talking about the Bosnian pyramids, but are there pyramids in Bosnia? And he just went, no, it's not true. There are no pyramids in Bosnia. Okay, thank you so much. And that was all. And the journalist had a lot of critical questions to me because I'm not a professor in archaeology. But no critical questions towards that archaeologist. So I sent him an email afterwards asking, okay, so apparently you know it's not pyramids. Please, can you show me the evidence? Because I'd like to see it if you do have it. But he said, no, sorry, I don't have anything. I just heard it on a conference in Malta. And who shared the information there? It was, of course, the head of the European Association of Archaeologists. And it goes around like that. So that's something that I've really learned from this, is we need to really pay attention to how much do we trust people just because of their title, and also remember to ask critical questions when they share something. And this is, I don't say this to point fingers at anyone in particular, but to show that we have a tendency that we need to be aware of. Because also these high profiles, of course, they get more attention on the media, and people listen to them more. And that is a problem if you have something new that you want to come forward with.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when National Geographic came to film a documentary to debunk the Bosnian Pyramids. And they brought with them two professors from British universities. One was a geologist and one was an archaeologist. Now, being a geologist myself, I was interested in the background of this geology professor coming here. And I asked him directly, have you been to Bosnia before? No, it was his first time to Bosnia. Have you visited any other pyramids in the world before? No. So coming to Bosnia, first time to look at pyramids. And his first day, he arrived at the Ravner Tunnels. And before he'd even taken out his compass clinometer, which is fundamental piece of tool for a geologist, before he'd even taken any direct measurements, he was saying that it's all nonsense. And this is someone claiming to be the voice of reason in science, and National Geographic are promoting his, which it is just an opinion at this point, because he hasn't taken any measurements. And National Geographic are filming that opinion and presenting it to the general public as an absolute fact. Now, over the course of the week, that I think he was there for 5 days or a week, he did take a few dip and strikes of the north face of the Bosnian Pyramid of Sun, for example. But again, we're talking about such a vast area. It's 2.2 kilometers between each of the peaks. I mean, it's a massive, we're talking at least 24 square kilometers over the whole surface area of the Bosnian Pyramid Valley. You need to take more than a few dip and strike direct measurements to understand what's going on with the geology. Now, I'm sure he looked at the geological map of the region, which is available online, to make any conclusions. But what I've actually gained access to is the raw data collection for the geological map that's being promoted as proof that it's just geology. And when you're looking at this data collection, this is like the raw data what a geologist would be doing in the field. I noticed that there are 0 measurements made on the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, the Bosnian Pyramid of the Moon, Bosnian Pyramid of Dragon, Temple of Mother Earth, Pyramid of Love. The geologist creating the most recent geological map didn't make any measurements on those areas of contention. Now, is that deliberate, or is it just the fact that there weren't any exposures at the time that geological map was made? Because obviously the Pyramid of the Sun Foundation has created these exposures. That doesn't really matter. What matters is that these geologists are using this geological map to make conclusions, and obviously archaeologists are listening to what these geologists are saying, but they're basing their opinions on maps that don't actually have any direct measurements on the locations that we're debating, whether it's a pyramid or natural hill. So it's absurd, actually, completely absurd. And I would just like to see more people come here with an open mind. You know, they call themselves scientists and they're standing for the truth and everything like that, but they're not actually. They're just listening to, as you say, someone in authority who says it's not a pyramid, and they're taking their word for it, and they're not looking any further. Now, obviously, there's other reasons why that is the case. I mean, people in 2020, 2021, they lose their careers for just an innocent tweet, for example, these days. They say the wrong thing, they could get canned. At universities in Britain, for example, now, professors, I'm sure, have to be very careful what they're saying because every lecture is recorded and filmed. Whereas, 10, 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. They might have been able to say something controversial to pique the interest of their students. Now it's probably a lot scarier for them to actually push the boundaries of what's acceptable free speech, because it could just be recalled up and posted on the internet and taken out of context. So I think a lot of people in positions, not necessarily at the top of the food chain, but in the middle, who might have the expertise to base an opinion on fact, probably aren't daring to do so. We had an Egyptologist come in the early days of the project, and he spent a great amount of time here studying the Bosnian pyramids, and he was making public statements supporting the project and supporting the notion that there was anthropogenic activity shaping, at the minimum, shaping these hills into pyramids. And when he returned back to Egypt, he lost his job for no other reason that he was outspoken on the Bosnian Pyramid project. We've had an archaeologist work here in the past who was threatened by her professors. If she supports the project, she'll never work as a professional archaeologist again. And bless her soul, 2 days after she received that letter, she was on Bosnian television supporting the project. Unfortunately, her professors did stick by their words. That was very sad as well. So a lot of people don't want to risk their careers at this point.
Yeah. So I think what we can all learn from this is that every time we listen to new information, whether talking for or against discoveries, we always need to listen to the arguments rather than to who is saying what. And science, to be true science, always need to be open-minded and actually do the investigations and not just base things on hypotheses. But we need to move forward also to get to around these last few topics and also take some questions. And I've seen some people are already writing questions. That's perfect. You can put them there in the chat already now, and then we'll take them in the end. But we have two more things that we will look at, and one of them is, what are the latest discoveries here in Bosnia, Richard? What have you been finding the last few years, like of the major importance?
Okay, so we touched on the speleothems and the radiometric dating. That took place. That tunnel system that we found was the Ravner tunnels. We first identified that in 2018, and this significantly extended the known lateral extent of the Ravner tunnels complex by several hundred meters. And then a year later, in 2019, we discovered another section of the tunnels, which we're calling the Ravner 4 tunnels, and that was found completely by accident. We were doing some landscaping in the park near to the tunnels, and we found an entry point. And this is the most southerly entrance that we found into the Ravner tunnels complex. So this brings us closer to the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun than we've ever reached so far. Now, in 2020, the plan was to focus our excavations on this new tunnel section, Ravner 4, with the help of volunteers. Unfortunately, because of everything going on in the world, we weren't able to follow through with that. So right now, Ravner 4 tunnels is pretty much laying dormant and sits as it was found in 2019. So we're hoping in the summer of this year, we'll have some more volunteers and we'll be able to start excavating those tunnels, because, as I say, this brings us most southerly location and therefore closer to the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun than we've ever been within this subterranean network of tunnels.
Great. My last question for you is, what do you think the purpose or the purposes are of the pyramids and the tunnels? And actually that collides with some of the questions that have been asked. So let us start on the questions, starting with this about why were they built? And there's a person asking if you could elaborate on or share any ideas of whether these pyramids are grid points of ley lines positioned to hold physical energy. So is that one of the reasons, and could there be other reasons?
So there are probably multiple functions for pyramids, and not every pyramid is the same either. So the function of pyramids in Egypt, for example, may be different to the function of some of the pyramids in, say, Mexico or in Brazil, for example. Now, some of them can be just built for ritualistic purposes, and other things that they could be used for is actually, they were, rather than being tombs, I mean, hopefully everyone logged into this webinar right now is at a point where we can dismiss the notion that the original purpose of these pyramids were built for megalomaniac pharaohs to be buried in. Okay, that is not what the pyramids were built for, especially the Bosnian pyramids. Just the sheer scale of them. Now, these structures are certainly should be looked at more in terms of machinery or technology. Now, how this technology works, you know, that's why we're here. We're trying to understand it. Anyone who says they understand exactly how a pyramid works is probably been a little bit disingenuous. But what we can assume is that these machines, at least partially, run on the passive electromagnetic fields present on and in the Earth, as well as also astronomical energetics that are coming down. I mean, in Giza, for example, the Scan Pyramids project measured that the chambers inside there are collecting solar particles and concentrating this energy in certain points within the pyramid. Is it by chance? Probably not. It's probably engineered that way. And so one of the functions is how, when people are talking about grids, why are they building pyramids where they're building them? Certain points on the Earth will have certain electromagnetic hotspots, let's just say nodes and antinodes, where there's focal points for example, telluric currents traveling through the Earth's crust. And it all depends on the material underneath the ground, as well as the location geometrically, because some rocks, for example, can conduct better than other rocks. That's why, generally speaking, you might find pyramids built within sedimentary basins rather than igneous fields, for example, because there's in the sedimentary fields, water is able to percolate through that rock, and obviously motion of water also creates an electrical current. So it might be a coincidence, or it probably isn't, but underneath the Bosnian pyramids, for example, we've got some really fantastically thick layers of clay, really pure clay. And this clay is non-expanding clay. So what that means is whether the clay is saturated with water or it's dehydrated, the volume stays the same. So not all clay is like that. So some clay, if it gets wet, it will expand and then it will contract when it dries out. So you imagine trying to build a structure that you want to last through a long period of time on material that's changing its volume, that's going to create an unstable foundation. Whereas here in Vesico, that clay is non-expanding. So depending on ignoring the environmental changes that occur through time, that clay will stay the same volume. Obviously, clay, when it's saturated with water, is extremely conductive. In fact, it's one of the most conductive geological materials on the Earth is a saturated clay. So if you wanted to build a pyramid structure that relies on the electrical currents traveling through the world, you might want to build it on top of the kind of clay that we are finding here in Vesico. So going back to the function of the pyramid, I'm not going to go too much into my sort of theories as to exactly what the functions of the pyramids are, but certainly we can look at it as a machine that utilizes naturally occurring earth currents to function.
Yes. And maybe I can add that in the tunnels, there are megaliths that are placed exactly on top of where the underground currents of water are crossing. So we have something there that these megaliths are exactly on top of that. So intentionally placed, whether it's the megalith placed there or it's maybe holding the water in place somehow. And in terms of ley lines, we have been looking at ley lines and dowsing, and of course that's not strictly scientific, but that's a thing I also love about this project, that it's open to, okay, let's let everybody loose and let them have their own go with their own methods and see what happens, and let's inspire each other. Maybe something will come up. So we've been doing some dowsing as well and seeing that ley lines do cross there. And Marianne Lane, a well-renowned Danish shaman, has been there, and she could also feel how the lines of energy are centered within the Pyramid of the Sun and meeting there. So yes, it's definitely got something to do with the energy grids.
Yes, and with these megaliths and the other things that are going on in the tunnels, with the very fresh air, lots of negative ions, the tunnels have very beneficial properties for healing the human body. So whether they were built to do that, or if it's just a very lucky side effect of the tunnels, that's also a function, at least nowadays, of the tunnels. We have some more questions here. Let's take them. There's one here asking, have you yet found an entrance into the Sun Pyramid or any of the other pyramids?
So the only entrances that we have into the underground tunnel network are 2.5, 3 kilometers away from the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun presently. So to answer that question succinctly, no.
However, there used to be a hole in the top of the Pyramid of the Sun, according to local people, but that hole was closed in recent history. So they say there used to be a hole, but it's not something that we can reopen and check for a fact now because of this zone at the top where we're not allowed to do any digging because of the remnants of the medieval castle.
Yeah, the top 2/3 of the pyramid have restricted access to any excavations from the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun. And apparently, according to those sort of reports of where those entrances are, they all exist within that restricted zone. Actually, we are working right now to have that zone reduced significantly so that we can perhaps start excavating more in those areas. And again, we're still very far away from the medieval fort at the top, and we have no intention of excavating there or damaging what has already been destroyed by the reconstructive work. So hopefully we will get that restriction lifted soon.
Yes. And I guess the person who was asking this question were comparing to the Egyptian pyramids that seem to be intentionally built for people to go into them, since there are hieroglyphs and such inside. But for now, we don't know for sure what's inside these pyramids, whether they were actually made so with the purpose of people entering into them, or whether people were not supposed to do that. But there has been scannings to scan for the temperature of the hills or mountains or pyramids, and it seems on these scannings that there are empty rooms inside because the temperatures are higher. Isn't that so, Rich?
Yeah, so they call it thermal inertia. They measure the temperatures at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, and you can measure the rate of heat loss, for example. And if you've got empty cavities inside the hill, it's going to heat up quicker and cool down faster. And that's what we see on all of the pyramid locations, is that it has a high thermal inertia compared to the natural hills in the area. So yeah, probably there will be some open spaces, just like in the Giza pyramids, but also it took a long time and a lot of effort to gain entry into the Great Pyramid of Giza, and that was without being buried with soil and trees and everything else on top of it. So I think patience is required, and the geophysical techniques that we have available to us. You know, people say, oh, why don't you just use georadar or seismic surveys? It's difficult because of the material we're facing. There's a lot of clay in this area. Georadar doesn't work very well at all with clay. You get a lot of reflections back. And with seismic surveys, you've got to remember that the scale of what we're looking at. A lot of these surveys won't be able to produce a resolution high enough to be able to find a small passageway entrance. So unfortunately, there is no magic bullet that we can use, not one specific method to find where these tunnels are. It's going to take a lot of time and patience to actually identify where these entrances into the tunnel exist, entrances into the pyramid exist.
Mm. Yeah, and also when you get to see where these tunnels entrances are on the pyramid, we have to remember the pyramid is so huge that on the bottom of it we have houses a long way up and until it starts to be a forest. So if you have entrances coming out in the backyard of someone's garden or into somebody's house, you cannot just dig there. So it has to be entrances that are at places where it's possible to get the permission to excavate.
And also, a lot of the municipal water for Vesico is being extracted from underneath the base of the pyramid as well. So any passages, any excavations, it potentially, hypothetically, could disrupt the water supply for the entire city. So this is some logistical issues that will have to be carefully examined when entering into a pyramid. If the water table has raised to a point where the passages are themselves flooded by the water supply that the town is using.
That's a good reason to be patient with the excavations, that the slower it goes, the less risk of damage, both to the water and also to all the old artifacts and sites. We have one more question here that says, is it the same or two different cultures who have constructed the Bosnian and the Egyptian pyramids? What are your personal opinions?
So, I mean, if we look at pyramids all around the world, they all have their unique style. Okay, so when we're talking about, probably they are different cultures that have a single sort of binding civilization. So there may have been a global civilization just like there is today. But for example, the architecture in South America today isn't the same as the architecture in Europe today with our cultures. So you could argue it's a similar kind of thing when you have pyramid builders in Egypt, pyramid builders in Bosnia, pyramid builders in China, for example. They will be based on certain design principles and they may have communication between each other, but also they will have their own style, their own background, their own languages. And so probably we're looking at something like that. It's a global community, but also with individual cultures within that.
And regarding the timeline of it, for now, the pyramids in Bosnia seem to be older than the Egyptian pyramids, but who knows, maybe the Egyptian pyramids will at some point be proven to be also somewhat older than what is mainstream beliefs now.
It's difficult to base the age of our pyramids compared to Egyptian pyramids because, again, the ages are always changing and we don't have all the facts from the Giza pyramids to know exactly how old they are. There's some ideas, but again, more and more information comes to a head and we change that age again. But one thing we can look at, for example, is if we look at the Egyptian pyramid building culture, we see that the Great Pyramids are the best quality and they're the oldest. And then as we move closer to present day time, the quality of those pyramid constructions become less and less. And you look at some of the most recent pyramids built in Egypt and they're just piles of rubble on the floor, whereas the oldest pyramids are still almost in pristine condition, minus the covering stones that were removed. So looking at that trend, we see in Bosnia, those pyramids are even bigger, for example. So it may be that it's an even higher technology. So if we're going backwards in time where things are getting better, the older they are, then we use that trend to just look at it and say, well, the Bosnian pyramids therefore should be older than the Egyptian pyramids if they're even bigger, for example, following that trend that we see within the pyramids, within the Egyptian culture.
Yes. That was the questions that we have received for now. But to round this webinar off, I think it would be good to mention, if people who have seen and heard what we have said would like to know more and get involved, or go and see the pyramids in real life, or see some more pictures or videos of it, where can you go for more information, and how can you get your fingers in the actual
So we
soil?
have Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun website. Just Google Pyramid of Sunsa, or pyramidofsunsa.ba is the web address. That's in Bosnian, and also it's in English. It's translated into several different languages. Also, we have one of the official Facebook pages is Dr. Sam Osmanagich. All the information gets published there on Dr. Sam's Facebook page. Also, I have a Facebook page, Richard Hoyle. My YouTube channel, Forgotten Pyramids, that's where this will be getting uploaded. And regarding the volunteering camp, I have to say this is, all three of us started this project as volunteers, so we're a little bit biased. But if you really want to understand and learn more about the pyramids, there is no better way of doing it than to become a volunteer. And I know the world is a little bit crazy still right now, and we don't really know what is going to happen. But as it stands right now, we are operating on the assumption that a volunteer camp will be going forward in summer of 2021. In fact, the restrictions here in Bosnia aren't as stringent as some of the other countries in Europe. And there are still international people traveling here into the country, and they just require a negative test result from the last 48 hours. And there's no restriction of movement once you have that negative test result. Hopefully in the summer, when that comes, we won't need any of that nonsense anymore. But for more information on the volunteering camp, just head to pyramidofsunsa.ba, follow the links, and all the information will be there.
Great. And Rie just posted some links in the chat, which we can also post alongside the replay video. And Rie, if people would like to read your book, how can they find that?
My book can be purchased from my own website, riejespersen.dk, or from the publisher, lemuelbooks.dk. And I've shared a link in the chat as well to where you can buy it. And if you should be interested in coming with Julie and I on a portal journey and meet Richard and see the pyramids and feel the energy yourself, you're also very welcome to do that. And you can find more information about that on portaljourneys.dk. And we're also on Facebook, Portal Journeys, and the links are in the chat.
Yes. And for now, we have waiting lists for our trips, because our 2 trips in 2020 were postponed. But as soon as it's being opened up again for travel, we will arrange more trips. So you can sign yourself up and get the information on Portal Journeys DK on when we have more seats available for our trips to Bosnia. And there is just one quick little question. Let's take that last one while people also are giving some nice messages here. One is writing, can I build a small pyramid in my garden and benefit from the energy in it? Do you recommend a website or somewhere I can find information about a homemade pyramid?
Absolutely. In England, I actually met his wife. Thought he'd gone crazy. He actually turned his whole back garden into a pyramid, and he's a builder, and he aligned it north, south, east, west. I mean, it looked ridiculous in the area because there's this big white pyramid in his back garden, but he swore by it, that he would go inside there in the evenings and meditate. Sometimes he would sleep in there and it really helped him, and he found it to be very beneficial. So yeah, the pyramid shape, absolutely. You can actually buy copper pyramids that you put over your bed, for example, that you can sleep in. Because the most important thing is the pyramid shape. The shape of the pyramid does focus different kinds of energetics just by having that geometric shape. Even a picture of it can do such things. That's how symbology works, for example, or one of the ways it works. But yeah, just get a compass and build it north, south, east, west, and you'll have a fantastic time. Why not?
Great. Yeah, so thank you, Richard. Thank you, Ree. And thank you, all of you who have joined us here tonight. And thanks for your comments and your questions. I hope you enjoyed it. And we look forward to seeing you out there in real life once it's possible to do so again. We look forward to going to Bosnia as soon as possible also.
Yeah, so I look forward to everyone coming as well, because it's been a strange year. We actually, just to go off on a tangent quick, we actually had one of our busiest years this year, strangely enough. And, you know, one of the benefits of this whole fiasco is that in former Yugoslavian countries, they're taking more interest now in the Bosnian pyramids than ever before. So that's one of the benefits, because it's always been sad that they've kind of ignored this fantastic phenomena in their own country, for example. And now they're actually interested because they've been stuck in Bosnia and the surrounding countries. They've come here and they've seen what all of us crazy pyramid people have been talking about for the last 10 years. But yeah, it'll be really good when everyone can come back and enjoy the location, the ancient archaeology, the energy, and everything else. So I look forward. And thank you very much for having me on this evening, Julie and Reed. This is my first Zoom webinar.
It's
really, yeah, I feel like I've got to get involved with it now that it's the new normal.
Yeah. Yes, I also want to say thank you, Richard, thank you, Julie, and thank you all you lovely participants for all your supportive comments and your good questions. And see you out there.
Okay, ciao.
Yeah, ciao.
Bye-bye.